First, what I'd like to do is I got to turn up not just one, but I got to turn up two microphones today because the prodigal gun host has returned. Forrest Anderson is in the studio with us from Washington Street Pond. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be back.
We were just talking about automobiles and the like instead of guns, but we will talk firearms mostly this hour. And Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense with us.
It's good to be here. Good to have Forrest back.
Yeah, I was going to say it's been a long time, but I was talking to one of our other guests the other day who was sharing with me how much people like this segment. And then they asked about what happened to Forrest, and I said, well, he went to Italy. Uh,
I have actually an interesting story about Italy to tell you where the left logic. Okay, so we were in wine country in Tuscany. We were at this very small winery, and we were asking her, and she says, "Well, I should be producing 15." It was a pretty small winery. She said I should be producing 1,500 bottles of wine a year, but I only produce 900. And I asked her why, and she says, "Well, all the deer eat all my grapes." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you hunt the deer?" She goes, "Well, the left outlawed the hunting of deer, so now the deer eat all the crops. So then they brought wolves in to eat the deer, and now the wolves are eating all the cows and the sheep because obviously they're an easier target than a deer. So rather than just have a hunting season and shoot the deer, they have banned the shooting of the deer. They don't think that's right, and now the deer are eating all their crops, and the wolves are eating all their livestock. So
So they've compounded it like twice,
yeah,
the
exactly.
problem.
so now they have to bring in grizzlies to actually take care of the wolves. Is that how this works?
Well, I don't know. They could just license hunters and make money off the
Yeah.
licensing and hunting of the deer, but another another example of how too much government is not a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, they if you put private industry in charge of that, somebody would figure out a way to make money off that deal. But nope, not gonna do it.
We wanted to mention got a couple of topics we're going to touch on. Speaking of government, there's the last time you were here a couple of months back, we were talking about suppressors and the fact that there was a lot of discussion going on that there would be some federal action and we would have some of the restrictions removed. So you don't have to wait, 8 months in order to get one if you'd like to buy one. There's a story out of the Salt Lake Tribune that I was sharing with both of you where the writer mentions that there's a fellow who actually manufactures these, in West Valley down in Utah. And
Silencer go.
yeah, and he was expecting this big boom in business, but nothing's happened so far.
Well, one, having selling these every day, people are waiting. People are like, well, I don't want to wait, write a $200 tax stamp check, mail it off, then have them pass something, and then have us wait to get our money refunded by the government. Blah
Sure.
blah blah. The biggest thing is the Republicans have the presidency, both houses, and they have not done anything. I mean, I think honestly, what I've come down to is I think they want to use this to get elected on the next term. Because if they actually did something, they couldn't say, well, next term we're going to do this. I mean, the Health Care Act has got them elected 3 times,
Yeah.
and they still have done nothing about that. Um, Now they're going to do that with suppressors. They're not going to do anything this time, and then they'll use it again, and then they'll use it again, and then eventually they just won't do anything. Once they've played that card enough that it holds no more credence. So I,
Todd, well, Todd shared with me that they pulled the hearing now on this, right?
Yeah, according to what I read, I sent you that article. It said that after the shooting at the baseball practice, they actually canceled the hearing on it. And I just kind of was telling Forrest about it, and I was skimming through the article, and it didn't say that they were going to reschedule it, or it didn't give a time that they were going to reschedule it. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. And even mentioned that National Reciprocity Act in there as well. That they were maybe still trying to work on it, but that's one of those things that they keep trying to work on every year, every year, every year, and it doesn't ever go anywhere either.
I was going to say they're talking though some members of the House and probably Senate too in Washington about allowing themselves to conceal carry on Capitol Hill because and the other problem is you could perhaps be doing it in Virginia but crossing into Washington, which has some terrible gun laws, even though the courts have come by and several times slapped them down for it. But they're saying that they'd like to basically arm themselves, although they're not talking about making sure that other people are armed, just themselves at this point.
Yeah, and that kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. I mean, the so-called elitists, what they're calling themselves, the upper crust, and they get to protect themselves, they get to carry a firearm, but nobody else does. In my mind, that's not right. They work for us, so
The state of Idaho actually not too
yeah,
long ago he used to have that same law. If
yeah,
you were a city
hated that.
councilman or a mayor or something like that, then you could carry concealed without a permit. But if you were anybody else, I mean, and that just doesn't make any sense to me either. Like
We're all here, man. We're all
we're
one.
yep, and the fact that politicians now are lifetime politicians. I bet the framers of the Constitution, the one thing that they wish they would have written is written in term limits because having a I mean, if you look at the laws, you can serve one term as a congressman and get lifetime health care, lifetime. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. And they don't have to go by the same laws that apply to the rest of the
Well,
country.
and I've got if this goes through, I've got the wrong job because I could get paid a lot of money. I could have killer health care, and I could carry a gun wherever I wanted to. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Three things everyone in life would like. Well, at least in this part of the country,
Yeah.
we could say that.
Yep.
Idaho is one state. There were 19 states where there are people who are actually legislators do carry when they're at their Capitol buildings. Idaho is one of them. But what surprised me, it mentioned that in Idaho and Wyoming that we don't even have metal detectors. Plus, members of the public, according to the story I saw, can also carry inside the Capitol building. So if you're just in Boise and you decide you want to run in and see one of your representatives, you don't have to worry about popping it in the trunk or something before you go into the building. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. I would double check that before you
Yeah.
go and do that.
I
But
I would too because I haven't heard that, but I mean I don't make trips up to the Capitol, so
Yeah, I just stand outside, take a few pictures, and then go eat somewhere.
we
right.
we're very quickly kind of forming into um, this suppressor thing. It's one thing that people who got elected, the Idaho politicians too, used that as a platform to get elected. Well, now they've got elected and they haven't really done anything. I mean, their phones need to be melting off the hooks. Like, I don't care if you've got just plan it on your lunch break. The first 5 minutes of my lunch break, I'm calling my congressman. I mean, their phones need to be melting off the hook. And their politicians are about one thing. The local politicians here, they're about one thing, getting reelected. Their self-preservation is all they care about. So if they think they're not going to get elected, if they don't pass this, I guarantee it'll pass because they don't want to give up that cushy job and they don't want to give up the all the benefits that come with it. So if you make it very clear you will not get reelected if this does not pass, then I guarantee it'll pass.
Well, we talked about this a few months back that that Trump was elected, Trump was the president, and it kind of seemed like everyone was just going to kind of sit down and take a big sigh of relief and not chase it anymore, not go after it. Just like Forrest said, their phones need to ring. We need to let them know what we want. In that article that I sent you, it said that this was if they would have had this hearing, this would have been the first piece of Second Amendment type legislation that Trump had even dealt with or even looked at. So that right there tells you that
He favors it. It just hasn't gotten to his desk. That's the problem.
right, right.
We want to point out too as well. There's been a lot of debate the last couple of days after the shooting on Wednesday. Uh, the one argument from one side is, well, this is why we need to have more gun restrictions. I heard one fellow say, well, because somebody said, two good guys with guns stopped this from being worse. He said, well, yeah, well, they were well trained, as if somehow private firearms owners are not well trained. And I think that we all have an understanding that most of the people we know who own private firearms generally are among the best trained people you're going to find in the country.
I have a law enforcement guy that helps teach my class, and nothing against law enforcement. They're great. And some law enforcement guys are gun guys, and they shoot really, really well. They know what they're doing. They're very proficient. Some of them, they aren't gun guys, and they carry a gun, but they'll go and they'll shoot for their qualification. And I'm not picking on law enforcement by any means, but my law enforcement buddy, he'll tell you right then and there that more often than not, the average day Joe that carries a handgun concealed that actually takes some classes and goes out and shoots for fun all the time is going to be a better shot or is better trained than your average law enforcement guy because he does it because he likes it. Sometimes the law enforcement guys, they carry a gun every day, so when they get home, they take it off, they're done with it. It's kind of like that mechanic that's really good at working on everybody's cars, but his is held together with baling twine and duct tape. He doesn't want to work on his when he gets home.
Yeah.
And the other part of that is, budgetary concerns. We want
Yep.
law enforcement to be the best, world class. We want our teachers in the schools to be world class. But we don't pay them anything, and we don't budget any money for training. Like, we can't expect these guys to be, the best performance with a handgun, which they carry,
Mhm.
but yet never give them any money to train, and say, well, they should be training on their own time. Well, we don't pay them enough to train them on their own time. If you required a bachelor's degree and you paid them more money, man, you'd never have any of these issues with law enforcement.
I was thinking the other day, it took a while for the two officers who were there, the Capitol police officers, to actually figure out what was going on, and then they had to try to get the guy in line of sight. He was moving around some buildings. But if they hadn't been there, it is said that it took local police 3 minutes to respond, and they likely didn't get the 911 call until about maybe a minute into it. And this whole thing lasted under 10 minutes. But if there had not been the two Capitol police officers in 3 minutes while the other people are trying to respond, which may have been 4 or 5 minutes actually into all of this after that initial call, a lot of people would have been dead. And I guess that's the argument for somebody being able to, in private hands, or even if you're a legislator, to be carrying, because you can at least defend yourself, as you say, with all they had were bats and balls.
These mass shooters, almost to a T, are cowards. As soon as shots are returned, they get defensive. They hide. They don't stay offensive. They don't keep trudging forward. They go find a corner and hide, and you get them cornered. We go back to that story in Salt Lake a few years ago. Guy in a mall walks in. He's got body armor on. He's got two guns. Walks into the mall. A guy with a 380 with 6 rounds returned fire. The guy immediately went and hid in the corner and kept him there until police arrived. Like, he didn't even hit him. He just returned fire. At that point, their whole mentality changes. They go from this God mode where nothing can stop me to all of a sudden reality clicks in when shots start coming back.
Well, and they try to go to those places where they know people aren't going to be armed, where, baseball games, malls, movie theaters,
Mhm.
those type of places, parades, whatever it might be. They know that people aren't going to carry guns there typically, so they figure they're okay, and they can get 5 or 10 minutes.
Mass shooters don't often show up at a gun range.
No, not
Yeah.
very often.
It'd be bad for their own business, I suppose. Hey, speaking of business, we got a break in about less than a minute. Contact information for both of you.
My name's Todd. You can contact me at Patriot Defense on my cell phone. You can call me or text me. Area code 620-794-6223. That's area code 620-794-6223. You can find me on Facebook under Patriot Defense. Like the page, shoot me a message, and I'll answer any questions you have.
And Forrest?
Washington Street Pawn, 208-735-0012. We're at 321 Washington Street. We're 3 blocks south of Addison on Washington, kind of down by the old Wonder Bread store. We got a ton of stuff in today. I've just bought 2 big estate sales. Got tons of coins in there right now and some really cool old rifles.
We've got more coming up with these two gentlemen. And if you've got a comment or question, feel free to give us a shout. We're here until 10 o'clock this morning. Telephone number 208-736-0300. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. 23 minutes after 9 o'clock, and we're talking about firearms this morning. Joined in studio by Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense and Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn. And 66, Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. A question or comment for these guys, of course, 736-0300. They can talk about training. They can talk about specific models, give you some background on all of these things. Hey, quickly, I got to share something that I came across from Fox News yesterday. This comes out of Seattle, Washington. This is a short 40-second clip of a reporter talking about some of the efforts to curb gun ownership in Seattle and what the results have been.
The city of Seattle's answer to gun violence was to slap a tax on all guns and ammunition sold within its borders. Last year, it added $25 to the cost of each gun sold and up to 5 cents for every round of ammo. Since then, according to Seattle PD, reports of shots fired are on the rise, as are gunshot injuries and deaths. The tax has also failed to generate the $500,000 a year projected. Officials won't say how much was raised in the first year, only that it was under $200,000. Gun dealers who have seen gun sales plummet say the figure is closer to $100,000. The money is supposed to pay for a study on gun violence, a study that's already cost Seattle more than $500,000. In Seattle, Dan Springer, Fox News.
So the other part of the story, I saw the TV version of it, which was a little longer, is that more and more of these shops have simply packed up and moved to the suburbs. So genius, right?
Yeah, drive all the business out of town. That's fantastic.
The state of California has seen that, as they continue to raise their taxes to pay for the people who are paying nothing into the system. The people that pay the taxes are just moving out of the state,
Mhm.
businesses and individuals, because the problem with socialism is, I've said this before, but it's so true and it's so simple. Problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And the idea is great. Like, everybody just lives and a check shows up every month, and you just go live your life, and well, somebody's got to be making that check. Government does not make a dime. All they do is spend a bunch of money.
Does it surprise you guys that the number of shootings and homicides by gun are up? Because apparently the criminals aren't following the rules.
Yeah, go figure.
Yeah, that's pretty typical.
Yeah, it is.
You've got a class coming up.
I do actually. I have one tomorrow.
Is it full?
No, I can still fit a few people in there, and I've got another one that I haven't posted yet, but I just decided this morning I was gonna get it posted. It's gonna be on July 29th. Be the last Saturday of the month. That's the Idaho Enhanced Concealed Carry Permit class. Get a hold of me, and I can get you signed up for that. I also have a couple people that were interested in the beginners class, which I'm doing on June 30th. That's just a basic learn about my gun, learn how to clean it, take it apart, learn how to shoot it. We go out and shoot. We just work on basic shooting skills. That's going to be on June 30th. It'll be about 2 or 3 hour class. We'll start that at 6 p.m. and it's $75 a person. So I've got plenty of room in that. If someone wants to sign up for that, that'd be a good way to spend a Friday evening.
And what's the number
Oh,
again?
yep. Area code 620-794-6223. You can call me or text me. That's area code 620-794-6223.
926, and we have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next, and you're on the air with Forrest and Todd.
Thank you. And speaking of socialism, we ran out of other people's money a long time ago. We're hearing $20 trillion worth of debt that they put on the producers, and somewhere we've got to figure out, where we can get this paid off, because there's no reason for us to saddle our kids and grandkids with these terrible debts that are going to come due.
Well, I want to add to that, too, because people in media make fun of us, especially here in the Northwest, Intermountain West anyway, because they say, well, you're all preppers and you're all worried and you're all loading up on firearms and ammunition. But if the day comes where this type of borrowing and spending creates some sort of crisis, you're going to need to defend what you have.
Exactly. And it's the same concept. And where do you think they would all come? They would all come here for protection. It's just like the same as the people who protest the police, like in Dallas. They were having a big police protest. As soon as that guy started shooting, they all went and hid behind the police and the police cars. Just doesn't make any sense. That's the way it works, though. This entitlement generation is they want everything, and then the minute something doesn't go the way, they come crying. They're perfectly happy to use the system. I got in a debate with a guy the other day, and he was very anti-government. And then come to find out, as I questioned him, he's on full welfare. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you don't want to be taxed. You don't want, but yet you're getting a check from the government every month. If the government goes away, you realize you don't get that anymore. What are you going to do then? People just don't think things through very far.
No, they don't.
We were talking during the break. People didn't hear this because we were obviously off air about survival rifles, and you mentioned that at Washington Street Pawn, you have them.
Oh yeah, we've got one of the old AR-7s. You were
Yeah.
talking about those, the ones that float. You put the gun in the stock. Those
Yeah.
are pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we just took in a bunch of really cool old rifles, some old pre-64 Model 70 Winchesters, a bunch of ammunition associated with that. Coins, like if you're into cool old silver dollars, I've got about 400 of them I bought, ranging in ages from, the 1870s on up through the 1930s. A bunch of really, if you're a collector, they're really high grade coins as well.
I was going to say too, that silver is important if we ever have that economic calamity too, because people will be able to barter with that.
Absolutely. Half dollars, quarters, dimes. I had 4,800 quarters come in the other day, 4,800 silver quarters. We've sold those in about 3 days, but we always have lots of coins. But guns right now, especially, I've got a bunch of 3.5 inch, really nice hunting shotguns, everything from Berettas on down to, the 870 Super Mags. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in there right now.
Speaking of that, maybe in the next half hour we can get to this. Yesterday I was here with in studio with Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game, and we were talking about training young people to hunt and how if you're using a shotgun versus a rifle, there's some different things you have to know. It's not all one size fits all, but we can touch on that too as well. We've got more coming up with Forrest Anderson and Todd Eccles joining us in studio today. Bill Colley as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com. Our guests in the studio with us join us on Friday mornings, Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn and Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense. Coming up on 9:34, we're at 67. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And should point out too as well, if you've got a comment or question for one of our guests, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. And quickly, your contact information again. We'll start with Forrest and then Todd.
Washington Street Pawn. We're at 321 Washington Street. That's 3 blocks south of Addison on Washington. We're kind of right across the street from Platt Electric. Phone number is 208-735-0012. Come in and see us. Like Todd was saying, if you got a gun that needs cleaned, you bought a gun, you don't know how to disassemble it, got questions about it, just bring it in. We'll chat right over the counter there and help you out.
Patriot Defense, you can call me, you can text me, area code 620-794-6223. That's area code 620-794-6223. I've got lots of classes coming up. I'm constantly adding some more now that I got my own place to shoot. So get on Facebook, find me under Patriot Defense, like the page. I'll keep you updated of everything I got going on.
We should point out you could buy the firearms through Forrest and then move on to Todd for training.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And if you want to get one of Todd's cards,
you probably need more.
I'm out, but stop by the shop and I'll get you one of his cards so you can get a hold of him.
Now, Todd, you're mainly working with people with handguns,
Yes.
pistols and revolvers, but we also have a lot of people in Idaho. They hunt or they just have long guns for defense. And as I was talking yesterday with Kelton Hatch, he was here from Idaho Fish and Game. If you're training young people, there's differences between shotguns and rifles, and there are obvious differences when you think about what comes out of the barrel. But there's a couple of things probably people should keep in mind, right?
Well, yeah, and if you got a bunch of kids, or you're bringing up kids, for example, my kids they shoot trap and skeet, and I always shot a pump shotgun, okay, and I started handing that off to my kids to shoot. Well, first of all, it's too long; it doesn't fit them. We got to find something that fits them. Second of all, the pump's maybe not always the best one to start with either. I learned, because I'm not a big shotgun guy, but I learned that semi-automatic can be a better one to start kids with because it absorbs a lot of the recoil. It's not going to push them around as much as my old Mossberg 500 will. So there's a lot of different things. You can have the stock cut down. You got to make sure the length of pull is correct for them, and it kind of same thing as says as for rifles as well. Got to make sure that caliber is not going to knock them around, but it's still big enough to take the game that they're after.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in, like universally, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the news, it's more prevalent now. You hear about it more, but there has been a fair number of accidental shootings right here in the Magic Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Shotgun, rifle, pistol, handgun, whatever you're shooting, muzzle awareness, number one. Rifle, obviously, you've got a lot more distance that you can do some damage with than a shotgun, but still basic same things happen. Whatever that barrel's pointed, it's going to destroy whatever's in front of it. So just be really, really aware of that. And don't a lot of kids, talking about the Idaho Fish and Game, there's going to be a lot of kids out in the field, so they need to know the basics because you don't want them to have an experience that's going to scar them the rest of their life. Also, you want them to be proficient with whatever firearm they're carrying. So buy them caliber appropriate.
You want them to enjoy shooting it.
Yeah, don't get a 10-year-old a 300 Winchester Magnum, and after he shoots it 3 times, he's got a flinch that's going to take years and years for him to get rid of. You want to buy the correct caliber so the recoil is manageable and they have a good time shooting and develop good habits because bad habits are hard to break. You probably see
Yes,
that all the time,
yes,
Todd.
I do. All the time. So Forrest mentioned, have good muzzle discipline, know your firearm safety. We were both talking about a story, something I read and I posted, and it sounds like he might have read it too. There's a gentleman, a dad in Illinois, I think it was,
Hmm.
and he was teaching. He had his firearm, his handgun out, and he was teaching gun safety to his two boys. And it sounds to me like he had taken the magazine out, he had unchambered his round, he slid the magazine back in, and or left it out, and he was telling his kids, don't ever point this at anything you don't want to destroy or you're willing to kill or destroy. And he pointed the gun at his boys and he pulled the trigger and he go click because it was empty. He did that to each boy and say, see, you want to be safe with it, you want to make sure it's unloaded and all this stuff. His daughter walked into the room, and somewhere between the time he was talking to his boys and when his daughter was walking into the room, he reloaded that handgun and chambered around. His daughter walked into the room. He held the handgun up, pointed it at her, pulled the trigger, shot her, and killed her. Okay, so you have someone who's trying to teach safety
Right.
to his kids being totally unsafe.
I know that when I was out shopping and buying firearms a while back, well over a year ago, I guess. I can remember whenever anybody would hand me anything, before I would see how it felt, I'd point it at the floor. I wouldn't point it in any other direction. I felt that pointing it at the floor, even that something behind the counter is not likely loaded, I treated it as if it might be every time I picked it up.
Well, and you should actually, if someone hands you a gun, even though the guy behind the counter is going to clear it, if you know what you're doing and you're being ultra safe, he's going to take the magazine out. He's going to clear the chamber.
Mhm.
I still drop the slide and run, cycle the slide a few times just to make sure it's empty. Keep your finger off the trigger, point it in a safe direction. If you are unsure of where that direction is, ask the guy behind the counter, hey, where can I point this? I
Right.
want to, and he'll tell you a safe place.
Don't put it in your ear.
Yeah.
20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. We're joined by Todd Eccles and Forrest Anderson. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. They're here until 10 o'clock. We're at 66. Got about 15 minutes before we wrap up today's edition of the show. We're talking about firearms with Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense and Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn. 67 right now, 9:43. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Telephone number 736-0300 if you've got a comment or question. We were talking about during the break about kids being out of school and how a lot of them will be out and they're learning or they're just out. Maybe they're target shooting or they're going after some varmints. But there's some things to remember this summer.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just uh, set a good example. We had the honor this last month I happened to be DJing the policeman's awards banquet, and these guys are out there, Twin Falls City. These guys are out there dealing with usually the lowest common denominator society every day, and they do it professionally and do a great job, and they're really good men and women out there doing their job. Well, as we were DJing it, I just decided, we decided to honor the policeman of the year with a Glock 19. We got him a new Glock 19, and that was kind of our way of recognizing them. The police are really good to us. They shop with us, and we feel like they need some recognition because let's face it, they don't get paid for enough for what they have to deal with every day.
As I understand, the 19 is like the most popular firearm for police around the world now.
They're just a great firearm. They're not a subcompact, but they're compact. They're very Glock is super reliable. It's always going to work. Um, it's I'm not a Glock guy because I think they look like a
Brick.
like a brick, yeah, like a bar of soap. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I like aesthetics. But as far as a gun that's going to run every time you need it, they're great. Anyway, to come back to more where my point originated, um, when you're interacting, we're going to be out hunting, and there's going to be a lot of new hunters. And the same thing goes if you get pulled over for a traffic stop. Set a good example. The men and women out there enforcing the fish and wildlife laws, that's their job. And if they weren't there, there'd be all kinds of poaching. There wouldn't be any game left for anyone to hunt because everyone would just go out and slaughter it. Now, not everybody agrees with their policies, but bottom line, these are local people doing their job. So honor them. Show some respect when you're dealing with them, especially with your kids around.
Mhm.
Because that's how they're going to interact. If you get pulled over, you get a speeding ticket. If you're speeding, no one likes to get a speeding ticket, but you were speeding. So so treat that officer with a little respect and let your kids see how to interact with law enforcement.
I got a note that I saw a video last night that came out of Indiana where a state policeman talks about this new invention called the turn signal and shows people how to use it. So there, we all have to realize we make some mistakes now and then, and we forget to do these even tiny things. And sometimes you get stopped, but that's because, again, it's on you.
Yeah,
It's,
and it's a law, and you broke the law, and nobody likes to get caught breaking the law. We all speed a little bit, but you get caught, you just got to suck it up and take it and show your kids how to interact, and especially new hunters. They're going to be out there. We want to show them how to use the gun respectfully and how to treat the game respectfully, but we also want to show them how to treat the people enforcing those laws, and it's a tough job how to do that respectfully.
Todd, do you age limits when you're training people? Are there certain age limits that you have?
There's age limits to get the permit, but as far as if someone wants to, I've had people approach me and say, "Hey, look, we've got firearms in our house. We just got in this. We bought a couple handguns. I want to bring my kids over. I want you to teach them safety. Talk to them about that. As a family, we just have a family group. Talk to us about safety. Show us how to shoot, that kind of thing. I've done that before. So if younger kids, high school kids, junior high, or even younger, a lot of times if they're at a certain age, their parents need to accompany them. But I'll work with anyone, and we'll go out and we'll shoot what's appropriate, so they know what's going on, so they understand them, so they're safe with them, um, so they get all the right information. I have no problem doing that. You just have to get a hold of me and let me know, and I can set up something.
The other thing is we need to have not just, I think, the hands-on training, but we almost have to have firearms literacy. What I'm talking about, I want to share this. I shared it for the listeners in the first hour of the program, but this was a woman speaking this week, and she was appearing on a TV program Wednesday on NBC right after the shooting. Listens to what she claims to be a firearms expert. Take a listen to this for just a moment and see.
There is a point when we were listening to some of the interviews with the representatives. One of them said that there was a pause, a moment, and he was able to leave where he was exposed and run away. So that might have been a reload. So the difference is a pistol can fire one round at a time. Pop, 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 which is what the Capitol Police were carrying. This individual had a rifle. Semi-automatic means that you can switch it to a point where it fires pop, 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 multiple rounds.
Some of the lawmakers thought they had heard 50 to 60 shots.
Yes.
Who knows? You're a witness, you're hearing, who knows? But that's what it sounded like.
Yes, and it's very likely that that's the type of weapon that he's using. That is the type of weapon that we see in these mass shooting attacks. And I have to say, it's pretty remarkable that the police were able to stop them with from what we're hearing, their pistols.
So she's talking, well, I don't know, maybe to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions. But does she know what she's talking about?
No, she's talking about a fully, the difference between semi-automatic and fully automatic.
There's a reason why she was secret police. They didn't want her out in the public
Yeah.
spewing this stuff.
Very secret. Get back to your desk.
She talks about a pistol. She says, "Oh, you can only pop, pop, pop." But you can be pretty quick about pop, 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 pop too. And somebody who's actually had a little practice, I don't even think you need a lot with a rifle, can also squeeze off quite a few rounds too.
And it comes down to proficiency. There's people I know who would do a lot more damage with a single shot rifle reloading each time and shooting because they're proficient with the firearm than if you gave someone a fully automatic. It's really difficult to be accurate with those. And it's like what I tell people when they purchase a handgun for self-defense is, they talk about calibers and everybody's like, use the term called stopping power. That's a made up term. That means nothing.
Yep.
The only thing that matters in defending yourself is the shot that hits the target. And so whatever caliber you can hit the target with, that's the caliber you want to be carrying. If you can hit the target repeatedly and accurately with a 45 ACP, go ahead and carry it. But if you can't, carry something smaller. Find the right gun and the right caliber that allows you to hit the target. Because in a self-defense situation, the shot that hits the target is the only one that matters.
We should point out, too, even in this situation at the baseball practice, not only the shooter, but the people who were being shot at were looking for concealment. The reason it was difficult for the officers, I think, to find him was because he, for a time, was behind various buildings and backstops. And so, they had to be patient about whatever they were doing. But if you're ever involved in a situation like that, a couple of weeks ago I was talking with Doug Sugden, and he just said, know where the exits are. In other words, concealment sometimes is getting away, getting out the door.
Yeah, it's having your situational awareness, knowing what's around you, knowing where the entrances, the exits are, knowing where you can go to hide if you have to. Unfortunately, the gentleman that got shot, he was out in the middle of the baseball field. He didn't really have
Right.
anywhere to go. He
No
was kind of,
trees and
yeah,
nothing.
he was kind of a sitting duck. And the law enforcement officer, that was the officers that were there. They were looking for the shooter, and it took them a little while to find him because you got to think there's a bunch of people milling around. They don't
Mhm.
know who's who. They don't know where this guy is, and they really had to pay attention and figure it out. But they did their job.
I
So
think they scrambled up atop a dugout, right, and
I
got a
did.
better vantage point.
I think they may have. I didn't watch all the videos and stuff.
But
But
this also points out, when you were talking about law enforcement earlier for us, it points out the difficulty. We sometimes people say, "Well, it took you a long time to get here." Well, maybe they were at another call. Number two, if you're ever in a situation like this, at least even if they're not immediately returning fire, they've at least got the guy's attention when they show up. Because as you pointed out, a lot of these guys are cowards. He ended up hiding behind a shed, and then when he tried to get away, I think they shot him. But the fact of the matter is, just that presence turned this whole thing around very quickly.
Yeah, and let's face it, anyone that goes after unarmed people is coward. Anyone that does that, unsuspecting, unarmed people, they are a coward. And we need to be aware that the forces that would love to see the Second Amendment going away, they're changing their tactics. Now they're, rather than protesting in the street and things like that, which they've had no success with because the majority of the American public is pro Second Amendment. Now they're going to try to use those weapons against the Second Amendment. They're going to use their rights that they currently have to go, because I'm sure they would love it if this guy who was not conservative, who was not pro Second Amendment, if his actions got guns banned, I'm sure that they would laud that as a victory.
We wanted to point out quickly, we're likely to see another spike, though, in firearm sales because of this. And that's also, I think, irritates the side that would like to see that Second Amendment wiped out, is every time something like this happens, we literally see more people arming themselves for self-defense versus they don't go turn in their firearms and say, bad, bad. They just go out and load up, if you will.
Yeah, people react. They buy guns. They buy ammo. They take classes after Sam. I mean, I hate to say this, but after San Bernardino, that shooting happened over there. Oh my gosh, every instructor around here was booked up for months. I was booked up for 4 months ahead of time, and I was doing 3 and 4 classes a month, and I had anywhere from 30 to 50 people in a class, just depending on the day. But people react. People buy guns, so they'll buy guns, they'll buy ammo, so it'll kind of they can use it against us. But yeah, we're going to go out and buy more firearms to support what we love to do, support our rights.
And we should also mention May, I think, was one of the highest months in history for firearm sales. And if we keep up this pace this year, everyone thought it would slow down after Trump won the election versus Mrs. Clinton, because the theory was she was driving sales because she, not necessarily known as a friend of the Second Amendment, but as it turns out, we're on pace right now for the second highest year ever when it comes to firearm sales, and this may even drive it higher.
It's probably because the prices got so good all of a
Yeah,
sudden.
prices like brand new AR-15s around. We had a special few weeks ago, $440 for a brand new AR-15. Um, you can buy them every day for $500 for really good ones. U.S. made firearms. You don't have to spend a ton of money if you want to get into firearms. You don't have to spend a ton of money. There's a lot of good quality firearms, handguns under $300. AR-15s for under $500, and hunting rifles. If you're getting it out of kids, there's a lot of really good brand new kids rifles you can buy for around $330.
It's funny, though, because for a long time, AR-15 was vilified after some of these shootings. Other than this woman squawking about not knowing the difference between fully automatic and semi-automatic, she's squawking on the air about it. You haven't heard a lot of people talking about models this week. Instead, it's more of a general, just anti-gun message.
You did at first. They immediately called it an AR-15. He's got an AR-15. He had an SKS. It's kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum there. But yeah, they jumped on the AR-15 bandwagon and pushed that for a while. But it ended up that he had an SKS. But other than that, no, I really haven't heard a lot of people jump on the model. There was another shooting that day too. Did you read about that one at the UPS place?
Right out on the coast, West
Yeah,
Coast.
yeah, and he guy used a pistol, and I read an article where they were calling it an assault pistol. So pretty interesting how they play on words there.
Yeah, well, your fist would be an assault weapon if it hit someone with it, right?
There you go.
Maybe that's their argument.
Well, it's fear and intimidation. It's the politically correct agenda that they've used to silence people. You know, if they can make you sound racist, if they can make you sound uh, like on the fringe, they will just use whatever terminology they can to make you sound like that. So then your credibility goes away, and people won't want to be associated with you because of the stigma that they've attached to you. Um, Another thing I wanted to touch base while Todd is here is we talked about a lot of trainers. There's a lot of trainers. I just watched a YouTube video of a guy who the NRA pulled his certificate because
Lucian Black.
he was
Oh.
pointing guns at people in class, and just want to say locally here there's some good trainers, but there's also trainers popping up everywhere. Everybody wants to be a firearms instructor. Everybody wants to be a gunsmith. Everybody wants to do these things. There's just not that many people that are really good at it. It's just like any profession. There may be a lot of people in it, but there's just a few guys that are good. Todd's one of the good guys. I can attest to that. And we don't vouch by very many people. There's a lot of horror stories out there. Go with someone who's got a reputation. Go with someone who's done this for a while.
Ask around a bit, right? Ask people who know, right?
Exactly.
Come into your shop, get a few Q&A minutes with you.
Yeah, and I got no dog in the fight because I'm not a firearms instructor. I help a couple people with classes, but I just tell people go to someone who's going to be patient, who's going to take their time with you, who's going to give you a good class and give you good quality instruction. And Todd's that's a great example of him. He's the kind of guy that will answer your questions. He's the kind of guy that will make sure you do it the right way. And there's not a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people throwing classes together and saying, come on out, we're going to do a class all of a sudden, when they've really got no training experience, they got no law enforcement, no military experience, and they're just throwing classes.
We've got about 40 seconds before we wrap up. Your contact information?
Washington Street Pawn, 208-735-0012. We're open 10 to 6 Monday through Saturday, and we're open the occasional Sunday. If Sunday is Father's Day, I got 4 boys. We're going to be having fun, so we will not be there Sunday.
Don't blame you.
Patriot Defense, call me, text me, area code 620-794-6223, area code 620-794-6223. Find me on Facebook under Patriot Defense. Like the page, comment on the page. We appreciate it. Look for my podcast. I put them on there as well.
All right, thank you. And God willing, the creek don't rise. I'll be back on Monday morning between 8 o'clock. Just a quick note, tomorrow, Benito Baeza and I will be from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 p.m. Tomorrow we'll be at the Reformed Church on Pole Line Road, where there's a big event going on involving local law enforcers and other first responders. Hope to see you all there.